I'd like the next panel on achieving social licence to operate to come up and get mic'd up as quickly as possible, please. We've got one more before lunch. Lunch is not ready, so don't head for the tables just yet. There'll be nothing there. That will come, and it will be more prompt than yesterday. So we have a panel now, the last one for the morning, called Achieving a Social Licence to Operate in Sustainable Sensitive Operating Environments. Do you mind? And the chair of this panel is Catherine Tay-White, CEO of a business called FutureEye. And she is an expert on using approaches to social licence to operate that integrate public policy, risk management and foresight. Catherine, I'm looking for you and the panel. Thank you, Mark. Have we got Catherine's panel? They seem to have absconded. Maybe they're out rehearsing out in the back room. Jackie? Anybody seen a lost panel? John, we're missing panel 9. I think she's got them all being rehearsed in a back room somewhere, so. We'll have to keep it a bit tight because you're dying to have lunch. Lunch will be organised differently today. It'll be on the tables when we get out there after this panel, and we'll get it all done more on time so we're able to complete the rest of the afternoon. If you've lost your iPad, it's in one of the bathrooms. I have it here. I'll give it to Jackie. All right, Catherine, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, welcome to our panel. Have a seat. Oh, autocorrect. Autocorrect shows me as the white. I'm actually Tay White. We have a conversation really today about something that's just happened. It's the first time in the history of the world that 193 countries have got together to deliver and ratify at the UN General Assembly over the last 2 days the world's global goals, called the Sustainable Development Targets and Goals. What you see up on the screen there is the official framework that we're all heading towards now, unified for the first time between developed and developing countries, to say these are the goals that we want to see delivered. And really beginning from the 1st of January 2016, this is the agenda that will drive sustainable development. So what's this about? The reason why it's so important is that, we've heard over the last couple of days about some of the challenges we have, where we're going to have as many as 7.9 billion people, is that the right number? by 2030. So we have to clothe, shelter and feed them. And to do that, we have to halve the footprint and double the production, some say. We have to increase the capacity to resolve conflict. We have to have organisations that are able to predict, manage and resolve conflict easily. So we've got some rather significant changes to make, not just in terms of how our consumers interact with products or how governments resolve or reform, but how our supply chains achieve what we call a social licence to operate. And what that means is predicting the expectations, not just one or two layers down the supply chain, but as you saw with Rana Plaza, all the way through the supply chain, in fact, now. So that was 6 layers of responsibility that were expected of companies that had not just their ethics, but their suppliers' ethics and their suppliers' ethics, 6 levels down through the supply chain challenged based on the labour rights, the human rights. Compensation was paid and a huge amount of brand damage was done. And most importantly, what was established in terms of this area of social licence in a supply chain is that you can't push responsibility down through just legal requirements, having your supplier just sign something saying they understand the environmental and social requirements of your organisation. So big companies like Unilever, big banks like Westpac, they're all starting to work with their suppliers quite collaboratively to drive a sustainable outcome in their supply chain, to take some responsibility beyond the legal requirements. So what our panel's about today is to really share some of the insights from around the world about how we can make some of these goals come alive. So just to sort of highlight them, the first one, no poverty. The standard or the expectation there and the targets that sit underneath this are able to be brought out to bear by one of our great case studies. So I'd like to turn, if you could introduce yourself and then tell us about your great case study of what you're visioning for the supply chain. That would be great.
Good afternoon. Mahendra Singh. Till about recently, I was associated with MIT formally. Now I am in transition, doing some entrepreneurial things. What I'm going to share about is there are 4 different studies, in fact, we did in the recent past, I would say last 2 years, that covered palm oil. We covered agri supply chains, which was, there were 4 food and 2 vegetables that we studied, as well as grain. And these are all in Asia, just for the sake of just keeping the countries anonymous. And the whole notion that we were looking at is that a lot of these retailers, the big companies, they all talk about being sustainable. There's always this carbon. There's always this issue about deforestation. We all talk about these things, but why is this happening? Is this just because people who are doing these supposedly bad things, they don't get it? Or is there some sort of a lack of communication? That how come people in the West or the consumer is very much educated about these issues, whereas people who are at the other and the most upstream part, they're not sort of playing game according to the rules. Why is this happening? So we started looking at this whole value stream mapping in these different areas that I mentioned. So we looked at palm oil, and in palm oil we specifically focused on the small farm holders. So of course, if you understand the whole supply chain, there are some big players, there are people who kind of aggregate these small farmers, but then they are about 30% are outside of this, the structured or the formalized palm oil supply chain. So these are the people who act in a very supposedly not the right way. The behavior is not acceptable, the deforestation goes up, the practices, the farming practices are not sustainable. Then we did the same thing in agri supply chains. As I mentioned, we studied end-to-end. We went up to the farmers. We looked at how the fruit was moving, how the vegetables were moving. And the last thing was on the grain side. Now, this is much more the government procurement. Farmers were producing grain. And in all these, there were a lot of similarities. Farmers, when we talked to them, this was going to the ground, talking to the people, interviewing them, well-intentioned folks. There was nothing wrong that we found as far as discussions were concerned, that they did want to do the right thing. when we talked to them further about some of the practices that they were following, it became very clear as we put all the supply chain pieces together that it was purely about financial incentives. Yes, there is a lot of educational value. I think if we can educate them, give them some sort of instructions, guidelines, that would be very helpful. But it came down purely to financial flows. That when you start looking at how money moves and the product moves and the information flow moves, there are these intermediaries who step in and sort of tweak the incentives in a way that it forces the farmers to do things in a certain way. It forces the whole, it skews the whole value chain in a very unexpected way. And some of the things we understood from this whole value stream was that when the retailers talk about doing the right thing, they talk about it, but they don't back it up with the financial rewards. They're always, the procurement guy in the big companies, he's always looking for low cost. They're always trying to meet their own objective, although they will say that I want certified product, I want to make sure that the product is of the right pedigree, but when it comes to paying for it, they will say, nope, I need to go down, I need to buy as cheap as possible, and then when carbon discussion comes up, they will go and buy some certificates. So it is about a very misaligned incentive because the procurement guy is not looking at doing the right thing, they're talking about saving the money because the pressure is there. When the farmer is asked to change their behavior, it is going to cost them more to do the right thing. And there's no financial reward for doing the right thing. Even if they produce what they're producing, if the demand is there, they will eventually sell it. There is always a channel. And I'm not really talking about channels being there in agri or commodities. It happens even in pharmaceuticals. I know even in the US, you look at more developed countries, there are about 7 to 10% counterfeits that are moving into the supply chain because there is always another channel. If you have a consumer, a person willing to pay for something, product will find its way. So it is one thing to ask for the right thing, which is what the developed part or the retailers or people with the brand worry about, but not backing it up is where we see the big problems come. So all these 4 different supply chains we looked at, in fact, we looked at dairy as well in Asia, same issue. And what this causes is nothing else but lack of transparency. People hide things, and that leads to a tremendous amount of waste. In India, for example, if you look at the agri products, about 40% of vegetables and fruits are wasted. It's just waste, which I think is unsustainable. It is damaging the environment. Same thing happens with grain. Just miscoordination of supply chain. It just sits at one place. It is uncovered, one rain. You have infestation, you have wastage. People are dying of hunger on one side, and on the other side, you have grain and food rotting. So I think just as a starter, if every company that has some sort of a relationship with a product that has that sort of sustainability issue, just understanding, just going down to the most upstream level. And in addition to the product flows, having a financial understanding of how the money is moving, who is getting what, who is keeping what value they add. Just simple questions like this. I think to us it was very revealing. We haven't found a solution. Obviously, this is a social issue. It's a very difficult dilemma. Yes, there are certification agencies like RSPO, MPO bodies, and then there are others in the dairy as well as in the fruit in India. But it's the intention should be followed up with good actions from the consumers, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean, just picking up on that, for everybody to know, there are things like the Marine Stewardship Council, which is trying to put sustainable fish on the table. So even though we have 40% of the seafood or the wild-caught fish has a 40% reduction in wild-caught fish, the idea of the Marine Stewardship Council was to be able to provide some certainty, some sustainable fish on the consumer's table, if you like. So they've met a natural ceiling of about 15%. So even if there's demand for sustainable fish, and there is a concern that there's so much wild fish caught that it's actually reducing biodiversity by 40%, which is a staggering amount. And obviously at some point we're going to be challenging ourselves on the rate of biodiversity protection in the oceans. And that's a significant challenge. Even if consumers want it, we're not going beyond the 15%. That's the same in sustainable timber. That's pretty much around the same for responsible palm. It's the same for sustainable beef. So one of the challenges here in terms of supply chains is that the market isn't working to deliver the outcome the consumers are saying. So even if you do see sometimes consumers buying in this way, they aren't getting the products aren't coming through. So we've been looking at what the reasons for this mismatch are, and some of it is down to, well, the intermediaries, as Nahand had talked about, but it's not just about intermediaries, it's also about what's the incentive for a producer to jump on. It's what's the financial benefit, what's the reputational benefit, what's the social norm in the countries within which they're operating. So I would like to turn to Hugo to just introduce yourself and to talk about a case study where you've been working on in Brazil, where you've been establishing a new norm in the supply chain.
So thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for being here. We know that talking about issue 2 for the next millennium, that is no hungry, and we are between you and food. So let's do it the most efficient way. And the efficient way is talking about collaboration. My life, entire life, 37 years, was working in the food retail business in Brazil for multinational companies. And for the last 1.5 years, I am a senior advisor for retail business with Accenture in Brazil.
No CV.
And that for this, one of the things is that we will talk later in this afternoon at the last panel about conscious capitalism. And one of the things that I have been seeing, and I have been in the past executive vice president for supply chain, is that supply chain, that is how it was mentioned, probably a word invented by McKinsey, it should maybe change now for supply solution chain, because it's just about solution. Solution to the next one on the chain. That means from the raw material to the transformer, to the sender, to the retailer, to the consumer, and today to the sustainable disposal of the product. And when we are talking about supply solution chain, we are talking about cooperation. And what was mentioned from yesterday and today, we need to look much more to win-win-win-win-win solutions, because zero-sum relation have no more place in this world. And one of the discussions that we have is that if we take just Brazil, the last decade, we brought more than 60 million people to middle class. If we see China, if we see India, this is much higher numbers. And if we see East Europe, it's important numbers. That means all these people want to consume, and they have the right to. And we cannot say, sorry, guys, you're late. We already consumed everything that we could, and now you need to change your behavior, because we already did our part. So we need to work together to change the entire behavior. Sustainability is about 4 things. We need, first, new technology. We were talking about plantation. We are talking about productivity. Yesterday, we were talking about India. India, the big challenge, because they are minifundios. So the land is very small, and the question is how to be very high productive there if you even can feed your population. Because one of the things that we can see is that food do not pay the luxury to make tourism. So food is something that the better way is to have a supply chain very short, fresh, quick, to avoid any other effects that this provoke. So when I was working for my last employer, that was GPA, Grupo Pão de Açúcar, the largest food retailer in Brazil, acquired by Casino Group in France in 1999, and now in 2012 became the controller of that company. We launched a program called Faces from Brazil, or Caras do Brasil, that was to develop products from sustainable management regions to sell in our stores. And that means that people that develop products in a sustainable management way, that means that next generations will remain doing the same things the same way. They don't need to move. And this is an important impact. In Brazil, in the 60s, 70% of the population live in rural areas. Today is 9% and decreasing. Who will plant for the 200 million people that are living in the urban areas? So this is a big challenge, and it's happening everywhere. So Caras do Brasil, talking about supply chain, was identifying sources of sustainable management products that are good products, but they have two major problems. They have a distribution problem, and they have a cash flow problem. So what the company did, instead of squeezing the supplier, was giving them the capability to cash their sales in 5 days. The second thing is that they don't need to worry about the logistic. We will take care about that. The only thing that we said is that you need to put a barcode, and you need to put, if it is 12 in a box, put 12 in the box. It doesn't matter the box. You ship us. And we will handle this competing to huge trucks arriving for all the productivity. Is more expensive? Yes, it is. But again, it's a win-win process that is still there and bringing a lot of wealth to those communities, what is very important. The second example that is very, very interesting is that when very strong retailer competitors come together to work for a better world. But it's very difficult because we are very, very competitive between us. That means Carrefour, Walmart, and GPA, that's Casino, and now Cencosud from Chile also is in this block. We decided together to not sell, that means do not buy meat, beef from deforestation area. That means need to be certified. But this is not only a question of sustainability, it's a question of health as well. Because when you are buying from deforestation, means that you are buying from slaughterhouses that are not certified. And this is a question of people health. So the big, big challenge today is how we can give all these new necessities for this new incoming middle class that are between commas starving to consume, and balance this with the right system. Another thing that is very, very challenging in my country is that it's a continental country with 27 states with 27 different fiscal regulations. So in my country, a straight is not the shortest path between 2 points. And this is, again, a very important impact in sustainability. So the idea is how we keep the things more local, how we give back wealth to the population that work in that place to keep them where they are and reinforce their roots.
Yeah, they're great examples. I think the thing that brings it out to me is that once upon a time we could just have a sort of singular focus. So you could think about deforestation and just not buying meat from that area. And now with the global goals, you're actually being challenged to say, and also how can you do that in a way that reduces poverty? How can you do that in a way that might improve climate change outcomes? How can you do that in a way that improves education outcomes? And there's a great case study that I know of in Brazil where Mercedes was, as a measure of trying to reduce deforestation pressure, were putting a product, which is like a jute, into their car seats. So they were, on one hand, trying to create a conservation outcome with the community so that they could end up having an economic driver where they weren't able to then go on and cut down trees. And they were able to do something that was a good corporate social responsibility outcome, and it was also cheaper than what they'd been putting into their car seats previously. So it's cheaper, it was better, it was giving a good deforestation outcome, those sorts of things. And they're the kinds of exercises or projects or collaborations that are going to become just more and more mainstream in your supply chains. As an example, we're working on one at the moment on palm oil in either, we're scoping out at the moment whether it's in Liberia or it's in Indonesia. We're not entirely sure, but the structure of what we're trying to do is not dissimilar. We're trying to say, what can we do that might be good to reduce deforestation pressure and enhance the local community and reduce the tensions on land conflict and enhance raw materials supply for our clients who are supply chain, need to have palm oil in their supply chain. And the sorts of ideas or models that we're working to is to create real clarity around what are the dilemmas that everyone has, because we've all got quite different dilemmas. And if you look at the example in Indonesia, at the moment some of the palm plantation owners face this quite complex series of dilemmas, which is they've been told by the government that they've got a piece of land, that they've got to deforest within 18 months or they lose the land. And then they've been told by the community that the community does not believe that this is a license that's a genuine one. They think it's corruptly and unethically brought to bear. So they've got community challenge and they've got activists challenging them. And then along comes a consumer-facing company who says, well, we don't want to have deforestation type products anymore, so if you don't deforest in a particular way that fits the Greenpeace agenda, then we won't take your product. So here's a plantation company that's really got three major different forces impacting on them, and they've got to be able to resolve those problems and resolve them in a way that keeps the government satisfied, you know, resolves the land tenure challenges, resolves the activist challenges and the community concerns, and delivers a product which will provide a secure supply chain for palm. So you can see it's quite complex and not easy necessarily to resolve. So what we're doing is working through declaring what all of the dilemmas are, understanding the issues from a 360-degree point of view from everyone's perspective, and then seeing some acknowledgement of that and getting a shared sense of the vision about what do we want to see as an outcome in this land that could align all of the different interests to create, as Hugo was saying, the win-win-win outcome. What's the alignment process? Get a shared sense of the vision and then create a conservation agreement and then create a way of evaluating the progress of that. So the idea there is, in the end, you have a secure raw material supply, but you're also delivering something back to the community. You're also giving the government what they want, which is some access to royalties, etc. So we're going to need to be able to be more and more, I think, sophisticated in terms of our problem solving on these issues, because there isn't singular dimensions, it's multiple. You know, just in terms of preparing for this panel, one of the conversations that we had that I'd like you to maybe elucidate more on is the example that in terms of alleviating poverty, we've been told for years what we need is we need to have a bank account and we need to save. And as soon as that happens, then you can get microloans and you can sort of end up being able to hit the bottom of the supply chain, bottom of the pyramid and alleviate poverty. I think you've come up with some really interesting, challenging ideas about actually an alternative to that, which it'd be great for you to share with us.
So could I just quickly point to a couple of things that Hugo mentioned, which were very interesting, I thought. One thing that I've seen with the retailers or manufacturers is that they have very little understanding of where this product is really coming from. I think exactly what you did in your company, that if you could go and understand that these are the farmers, or these are the sources, or the SMEs, what it could be, what are their challenges? In many cases, it's just cash flow, and you all understand this. It's a matter of just somehow extending your credit. It could be as simple as that. But understanding and asking the question that why is this person not doing something that you want this person to do, if it is not a lack of understanding or education or training, it is purely cash. To say that we are victims because we could not find a better supply, I think is the wrong way of looking at it, or to be doing this blame game that these are bad people. I think that has to change. People don't do this. And what we had seen in the research when we talked to the companies, when we showed them this whole financial flow, that there is this middleman who's taking the money, and we found out this middleman is not always bad. They play a very important role. When the farmer, for example, his wife is pregnant, wants some money, bank will not loan them money. The middleman will give them the money. And once they give the money, they have the control. Similarly, if there is an accident, there is something else that they need immediate money, the system is set up in a way the banks are not going to give you any loan. There is always this working capital crunch. If you understand this, and for you, it is just a matter of saying, okay, my receivables, 30 days, 20 days, there is a very small, maybe perhaps more a notional benefit in your organization for that moving the receivable payable equation, working with the float. You can do a lot more with that extra buck or two by giving this person or extending credit to this person and unlocking their true potential. So I would suggest just looking at your value chain, look at the financial flow, look at how people are adding value along the way, and where are the constraints, and how you can have these people sort of remove some of the roadblocks. It'll go a long way. So that would be, I think, a very important step where you can, by doing something very simple, become socially responsible. Now, there's something else that we have realized very recently, and I started working with another company, and this is about base of the pyramid. Now, we have been talking about base of the pyramid for a long time, and the question has always been, how do you tap them? How do you make money out of this? They have very little money. It's like $1 a day. What do you do with this? Big companies are used to millions of dollars. Yes, if you look at India now, there are about 800+ million people that fall in this rural belt, so to speak. How do you make money? And this is where this e-commerce, this is where all this supply chain play becomes very interesting. And what we realized, and this is not a groundbreaking thinking, but just a simple fact, that if I look at a village, I'm looking at these, say, Indian village is about 2,000 people, about 400 to 500 families each. They spend collectively perhaps $2, $3, $4 a day on buying basic stuff, food, clothing, things that they need to run just on a regular basis. Where do they buy these things? They go to this mom and pop store in the village. Now, this guy is a small player. Obviously, they don't have a lot of assortments. And as you can imagine, they have to buy it from the city. They're looking at their cash. They're working all these things, and the price keeps going up. Now, I contrast this with a city dweller. I'm in Delhi, for example. I can go on the internet. I can go to Amazon. I've got Flipkart. I've got Snapdeal, whatever. I get a great deal. Price is low because of the competition. And assortment is great, selection, and good quality. So I'm in a city. I pay less for the same product or actually a better product out of a tens of thousands that I can pick from versus a village where this person is just basically stuck with this small kiosk that sells one or two limited assortments very, very expensive. But they have to buy it. The only option is they got to go to the city, which is another day worth of trip. They can't afford it. They are stuck with this. If I can enable e-commerce in a village, in a rural setting, that'll be great. For a simple reason, it is not to say they will now start buying all kinds of interesting things. It is just for their daily, day-to-day needs. If I can have them look at a better option of more selection, better quality, lower cost, one thing would be their quality of life will go up a little. And 800 million people, and even with the small numbers that we have, it add up quite a bit. But something else we had not noticed before is that perhaps they save maybe their disposable income could be, let's just say, in terms of, say, 5 cents was their disposable income based on what they were making and based on what they were spending. If I'm able to give them what they have been using for 95 cents so far, if they can do it for 90 cents, let's just say, I have doubled their disposable income. If I can do it for 85 cents, I've tripled their disposable income. These things go a very long way because now they can start trying to get ahead on their working capital, try to invest in something different, try to buy something different, try to do something different with the extra buck that they have been given just out of nothing. So I feel that going into this supply chain, in the e-commerce mode, into a rural economy, if we can figure it out, which we think there's a way that we have tried to do it. I'm sure there are better ways to do it. Last mile is an issue, but the volumes are huge. If we can think about a much more sophisticated way of doing this, I think we can lower the cost. We can enable them, these people, to, with their dollar, go a longer distance, save more money, and do something very different that they have never done before. So there is a way to unlock value, I think, using a sophisticated supply chain thinking in this rural community and serve this base of pyramid in a very effective way and raise the quality of their life.
Yeah, please.
Well, one thing that is very interesting that you said, that a study that we made in Brazil, because during many years I was the CEO of 2 Brazilian chains that was Fox in the base of the pyramid. And one thing that you only learn is when you make a study, a deep study of living in their houses. That's what we did, because it's easy to go up, it's very difficult to go down. And going down, we discovered 2 things. First, poor people don't want to be reminded that they are poor. And don't think that you know better than they do. So this question of assortment, if you can offer in e-commerce and do maybe through apps that go to mobile. We say smartphones is for rich people. No, smartphones is the most democratic way that poor people get into the internet. Not only to social media, but especially to how they can buy the things. The question will be this last mile. The question will be how I can deliver to all that people. And this is the place where probably the parcel companies get more responsible, where they could be public or better efficient, in many places private. And in some countries like Brazil, the mail is very efficient, so he can do it. But he needs also to charge what we call a social charge to be faster. They are fast, but they need to be less expensive. And taking what you said about deforestation, for example, one thing that very few people know in Brazil is that everybody that tried to export Brazil is a very complicated country, but 95% of all the electronics that are sold in Brazil are manufactured in Brazil. And when people say this is a protection, maybe it is. But the majority of them are manufactured in Manaus. Manaus is the capital of the Amazon state. And the reason is because there is a duty-free area. And doing that is for one reason, reduce deforestation. In the last decade, Brazil reduced 82% of deforestation in Amazon. And the reason is because if you are doing this product there, you are generating employment. Because people in the Amazon do not deforest just because they like. They do it because they need to live. And if you generate another source of working, they will not do it.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up an interesting model that Michael Porter developed called shared value that Nestle and some other corporations have been executing. And there's probably that sense of, well, where in the supply chain can we get an outcome that's good for the environment, for the community, and deliver an outcome that's good for us on a consumer level. And in terms of the experience of shared value, looking at it through our lens, which is a sort of a social license lens, what kind of resilience does it buy Nestle to be doing this kind of work? They can see that there's been some reductions in terms of slavery when they go in and actually look at what drives slavery in the two African countries where they get the majority of their cocoa. It's because the agricultural production levels were low, and when they go in and actually increase the agricultural production, they're able to reduce the amount of slavery. There's a direct relationship between those two things. So therefore, they can essentially increase a sense of shared value in the supply chain and at the same time do some protection of their social license. What I mean by that is the license of which people would say, you have a right to operate your industry, your company, because you have a set of values which we see as aligned broadly with the values that we see as a social norm. So in the case of slavery, we know that there is it's an unacceptable concept, and yet we have 1.2 million new slaves going to the supply chain every year. It's a massive problem. At the same time, we hold a moral value that says it's not okay, and the question has to be, well, how do we use our companies to seek to resolve those as much as possible? And this is one of the challenges in terms of supply chains that I'd like to explore as well, which is it's not a simple set of relationships necessarily, but how do you use the supply chains to drive a good outcome? And how do you do that in a way that builds a social license with consumers? So when consumers choose to buy your product, they're buying an effort from you to try and resolve some of these really significant problems.
So just coming back to Hugo's point earlier about the last mile, we realized, so I went to some of these villages, and when you just sit and watch what people do, you would find these youngsters, they were just running around on bikes, doing nothing. And there were autos, there were small trucks, they were just lying idle, doing nothing. They may have some work, perhaps in the morning, in the evening, but nothing else. And the idea was there was no way, easy way, to aggregate all these things in the past. Now we have a mobile phone, we have marketplace, thinking like Uber. Everyone has a mobile phone. And a smartphone in India now costs $30 US. It's not very cheap, but it's not very expensive also. There are some people who can afford this. Or even using a text-based system, using a feature phone, they all have feature phones. So technology in this case, absolutely, is able to aggregate the supply, which is just sitting idle there. What you have done now, you have monetized that supply. You have given these people who are not making money from their asset to make money. So you have uplifted their way of living. So you are serving the village using their own resources in many ways. So you don't even have to think about a postal service or such. In this case, it is a matter of using technology, thinking differently, and getting these people to realize that they're part and parcel of the modern economy. But what happens, the next thing that where we want to go is now what you have done is you have made a rural economy transparent. See, earlier, right now, I don't know who buys what in a village because it is done through a mom and pop store. I have no idea about their buying pattern. I don't know what they do. But once they start coming to a e-platform, once or m-commerce, I know who they are. I know where they live. I have the demand, very specific point of sale information immediately. Once they become visible to me, this is how this village buys, this is how this family buys. I can do analytics, I can do different types of things. So for us, it has been I look at mobile phone, I look at different tools that are available to ask a different question. The things that were unservable before, not anymore. These people can be served, you can improve the quality of their life, you can give them more money back in their pocket, and you basically crank up a virtuous cycle that I think would go a long way. So for all of us, I think it is just a matter of asking questions that, okay, there's this consumer base, how can I do it differently? Or there's a supply base, how can I ask a different question? And it's all there. I think it's a matter of putting it together.
Well, that's a good point to actually just throw to you in the audience. Are there any questions or comments that you'd like to make so I can bring you into the conversation? Yes, we have one. Thank you.
It's a bit of a change of role, but I'd like to ask a question, Ralph Evans, mainly for Dr. Singh, but for all the panel. Now, when Uber comes into a city anywhere and sets up its service, there's generally a big negative reaction from people who've got a vested interest in the taxi business, in whatever form it takes in that city. Now, when you set up e-commerce in your Indian village, there's somebody going to be upset there. I take it it's probably the owner of that small store, or maybe moneylenders or somebody like that, somebody that's been established in the community for a long time. Sure. And there could be some serious conflict that might go up to a political level. How are you going to handle that?
So the good thing about a village is that they know each other. This is not a big city. So if I am bringing a better service available or make a better sort of a option available to a villager, this is something, there are 400 families. If there are 399 of them, they like it, and one doesn't, so be it. Poor guy, he's got to deal with it. But more importantly, I feel that there is going to be segmentation. E-commerce, regardless of what I say, it is not at a point where I can instantaneously fulfill your demand. Yes. There is going to be a need that will come up for this guy to say, I need to buy something right now. So this guy will realize, that's what I do. So it becomes a convenience store. It becomes like a 7-Eleven sort of a setup where they will take over all the immediate needs of the people. I think that will be a better utilization of their own resources also. Right now, he's playing a role for immediate need, a long-term need. He's got a small space. He's got a limited working capital. So he's out of stock many of the times, I can bet you. Now he will say, I got only 15 things, let's just say for the sake of example. That's all I need to carry. I'm going to make sure if there's someone who needs this, I make better use of my money because I'm buying bulk. I'm making sure my customers are happy. So everyone will be happier. So I would see this segmentation happening over time. And when we said Uber, it was the Uber-like model. For us, we are not replacing a taxi here. We are actually putting more people into job. Putting these guys who were just, gallivanting around, just motorbike, zoom, wasting petrol for nothing. It was amazing to see how many assets were there. When I went to the village, I thought there will be no vehicle there. They're going to be on bicycles. None of that. They had bikes, there were scooters, auto rickshaws. They were all there for asking. So I think it is right now putting it all together using technology in an effective way can solve a lot. This is not a silver bullet, but I think it will lead to the next evolutionary phase.
I want to pick up.
Can I add
Yeah.
something?
Yes.
Yes, sir. No, because there's another situation in Brazil that are the slums. We have 8 million people living in Brazilian slums. It's not too much if you compare to 204 million people in the country. But we just came out a study, a profound study, call it a country called slum. This is a book, it's a very interesting, it's the same research company that worked with me in the past, understanding the base of the pyramid. And what they say is that who lives in the slum, 95% of serious people that work outside or in the community. And the other thing is that for more sophisticated items, they want to consume outside the slum. They only buy very few things in their own community. And one thing that is being developed to reduce this question of the last mile is that they created community mails. So everything is sent to one address. And they use the same process that was mentioned to use people from the community that knows the micro streets with no names to deliver this. So it's new jobs. And about Uber, I just took Uber in Sao Paulo to come to go to the airport. And at this moment was a big discussion about this question against the taxes. But my opinion is that what happened in all this disruption things at that there were mafia implemented before, especially for that. So if we are discussing that they don't pay taxes, maybe it's a discussion that we can arrive to that. But on the other hand, they don't have discounts to buy their cars. They don't have many other things that the taxi drivers has. And this disruption, I think, is fundamental because the last year we had 10 years rising very well in the Brazilian economy, and the last year 1.8 million people got employed. And when I speak to the Uber driver, he said, "What are you were?" I work in metallurgy, and now I was fired. And the thing that I found was this, and this is very decent now to work. So this is a lot of discussions about how you can make a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, I also ask an Uber driver every time I go in how they find it. And in Australia, they're finding themselves on the breadline with very small amounts of money below the average wage, and because of all the additional costs and all the rest of it. So there's some challenges there around what do the new companies that are disrupting actually embed in terms of sustainability and the existing labour standards, human rights, and other things. I'll come to you. I just want to pick up one thing, though, that you said. When you said there was 399 villages that might be for it and one against it, you just say bad luck. I think the bigger or underlying question there was, could you be identifying that as a conflict, potential conflict, and actually help that shop owner make the transition to the new model, as opposed to just sort of see him on the outer? Again, it's kind of like embedding a new ethic into the
it was more facetious, but the fact was that these guys are smart. You don't have to tell them anything. They will pick up, because this is how they survive. I mean, survival instinct.
They're much smarter than we are.
A lot smarter, practically speaking, street smarts. So the idea is that they will realize quickly that I don't need to carry these types of products because they can buy this e-commerce. But I know he needs this right away. What does he need? So this kind of segmentation, I think, would be right there for this guy, because now they will have disposable income too, right? They will have a little bit more money. Maybe they will spend on something else.
And if this is mom and pop. If he discovered this, and he is smart enough to discover, and he create a complementary product, a selection, assortment in his store, and say, come and pick up in my store what you bought in the internet, maybe he can do a complementary business as well.
There could be many number of things. So it is not about, it's not a conflict, it's really about segmentation.
Good, thank you. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm still Heidi. In my, however, limited...
Can you introduce yourself again, sorry?
Yeah, I'm Heidi. I have a consultancy agency called +7. I'm from Denmark. In my, however, limited spare time, I'm quite involved with a non-profit organization called Junior Champion International. And I just wanted to raise a comment here, because we've been talking a lot about the last mile and the importance of that. But I also want to draw the attention on the first mile and the importance of that, because we did a case in Brazil where we had to solve a situation where sadly a lot of people got killed by they got hit by a car in the intersections when they were walking on the streets. And the first idea to solve this was to make the infrastructure better so that the ambulances would reach the hospitals sooner, so we can bring down that number. But actually going deeper and deeper into the case study showed that this was not the problem. The problem was the light by the intersections and the signing for the pedestrians, or what's it called, people walking up the street. So I also want to raise a comment on finding out exactly what is the root cause and not just solving a symptom. And I want to ask the panel how they work with that. How are you sure that you're actually solving on a long-term basis rather than just solving a symptom?
Yeah, well,
Thank you very much for your question. And you're right, the first mile is very important. Someone mentioned that, I think you mentioned, that we are losing a lot of products that go to waste, especially food. Depends of the development of the country. This could be in the first mile, it could be in the last mile. What shows is the most developed country are wasting food at the last mile, at the supermarket shelves. In my country, I'm sure 50%, 40 to 50% from the first mile is not arriving to the customer. And the reason is because we are not prepared to this. So one of the things is about traceability. So with traceability, what we can do is help those producers, those planters, those agricultures to prepare better things and the way that they can flow their merchandise to a warehouse and the warehouse to the DC and the DC to the store to the customer. But if we say this is your problem, and as was mentioned, I want to squeeze, the last panel was saying about that, what matters is the procurement guy was the lowest cost. The lowest cost is a sum zero, and a sum zero is unaffordable. We cannot take it anymore, because what we'll do is that small companies, medium companies, and many other companies will die for this thing. So one of the things fundamental is how we can increase and how we can work to help this, I would say, basically in agriculture or very small companies, to have them provide their products to the big or to the large retailers, helping them in the first mile and avoiding that product will damage or just thrown away. This is a work that we are trying to do, especially in Brazil, not only for food retailers, but for non-food retailers. When we say, for example, apparel. Apparel is a big challenge as well. In the other side, to guarantee that during the chain, you are not working with slavery, we are not working with other things. And Brazil is a large producer of apparel as well for local consumption.
So just if I could add something to this. Absolutely right. The first mile, I think, is very important. And in fact, we are thinking that would be one great way to boost the rural economy. Because I look at India, every village has some very special handicraft or something, some food, something that they make is very unique to that region or to that actually very local area. The challenge is it has no visibility. So the earlier question was not about the first mile, it was visibility. Now we believe with the internet, with e-commerce and m-commerce, you look at Amazon, I don't know how much of it is Amazon products, but how much is it from other suppliers? That if the portal that we have built is that we can ask these guys to put up their products on the website and to sell it. So first of all, we make them sellers, and then we will say, we can pick it up. You don't have to worry about the logistics. So first mile, last mile, I think we are starting with the last mile because the demand already exists. The supply already exists. We just have to connect the dots. Once we have done it, once we have worked out the financial, how the money flows, now you have to bring new suppliers on board, and that's where the first mile will become critical. But thank you for asking. That's a very important point.
But I think this is very important. If the big e-commerce business work as real marketplaces.
Yes.
Because if the small business try to do his own e-commerce, m-commerce, he will die for lack of traffic. So he need traffic in the internet. So he need this marketplace. But this marketplace needs to do much more than just promote the product. Need to collect the product, need to distribute the product, to do that. And in a fair way, so this small business will make some extra money and good money in a sustainable way.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We've got 2 more questions. We'll start with you and then move over.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alan Braithwaite, LCP Consulting. I spent a few weeks in India a couple of years ago and walked the villages. I don't have the knowledge you do, but I found it fascinating. One of the things that struck me on the buy side as opposed to the sell side was actually that the wholesale networks and the trade buyers were actually very coercive, and that there didn't seem to be the co-op structures that you might find, and it occurred to me that the rural economy would benefit hugely from the creation and support of those co-op structures with the appropriate financing, so that those local communities could take care of more of their own value and not have it appropriated by the market structures that exist. Would you care to comment?
Well, I'm not an economist, and how these models will work out. The co-op model works very well in India for the milk. I'm sure you've heard about that. The green revolution that came in India was largely because of that. But I think, in my mind, those models have become dated and old. I think technology has come to a point where you can do different things. Now, jury is out. When will that model become superior to the one that we have right now? But I'm a big believer in mobile phone. I think it does magic. Instead of bringing them together, at one point, the value of co-op was aggregation, right? This is one way for me to get muscle, become big so that I can get a better deal from someone, because I did not know who that someone was. Now, if I can go on the e-commerce or a platform where I put my product up and I am in front of 1 million people, 10 million, in India, you're looking at 1 billion people, someone would value this. And that would be the maximum value. This is purely market. This is purely competitive. To me, the villagers think like this. They don't like co-op as much as I can tell you. I haven't done an extensive study, so this is a very small sample. But just the feeling that I had, very competitive, very aggressive. They want to control their destiny. So I would like for them to be liberated more than controlled, because co-op comes with so many hang-ups. You have rules, regulations, can't do this. Now, for certain products, you got to do it. For milk, for example, you need cold chain. You got to do this. But if it's handicraft, if something else that a person has made with a passion, which is not standardized. Because I look at grain, for example. In grain, you have A category, B or C. If your grain is really good, if it's A+, it is A++ because you did something, you were singing to the plant or do whatever, but it is going to be graded A. You lost value. If I could put this thing up and say this is A++, it has some very unique properties. I can bet you, if it's on a platform, someone would value and say, I'm going to pay you something extra. So there, to me, seems like a loss of value when you start with a co-op, that you don't have that uniqueness anymore. So how do I make you unique is through a platform, so that you can stand.
I mean, that's one of the big challenges here in terms of creating a sustainable supply chain, is that there's a possibility that you have a segregated supply chain and you've got a dimension, it's called sustainable, and in fact, even now you can buy chocolate which is slave-free, and then that implies the rest of it is got slaves. So
Cannot buy them.
so there's sort of there's a segregated argument, or there's an argument that says that bifurcation is actually dangerous. You want to lift the floor on everything. Do you have a view?
So I would say enabling the guys means, again, going back to the point that we have been saying, it's all financial incentive. At the end of the day, if they know I can make a better product. Yes, there are some people who will just not play by the rules, but I think that's a small minority. Majority of the people, if they know that they can, because they are investing their time and labor, they have the working capital, they have a market to do this, they would do the right thing. If I think I can do the right thing, if the incentives are right, I have to trust they will do the same thing. So we have to get to a point where we have to show them the way, we have to give them a market, we have to enable them to say there are financial models available where you can get your working capital. I think that problem, that is the root of the problem to me, the structure.
Hugo, what do you think?
It's a complicated issue, this, but when you said, what we did is two flows of supply chain, one for sustainable items and not one for not sustainable. I would say that's not for non-sustainable. We need to bring both in the same way and enlarge this sustainable to become all the flow or the right flow. Because if we do that, we will keep it doing win, 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 and move this traditional relation to the other one. For example, when retailers say, I do not have anything to do with that, it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. We are not only service renders to suppliers. We are responsible for everything that we sell. That means that we are responsible for the integrity of the supply chain.
Okay, we've got one more question. I think there was, yes, please.
So thank you very much, Mahendra, and actually the whole panel found fascinating. And it reminds me that we think of supply chain so much from a first world perspective when there's so much value from the third world perspective. The one question I have is how much is the first world actually beginning to react to the needs? There was that story in India about the soap manufacturer where Unilever was putting everything in 5-kilogram bags and boxes, and of course it couldn't get to the local people, and then the local manufacturer was putting it in little packets that they could just slip into their bra or whatever, right? So is there been a responsiveness in the sort of first world manufacturers or the developed world manufacturers, or however we want to name it? Not just in distribution, but in fact in manufacture as well.
So the way at least the view that I have of the village is, most of the suppliers that I see that are active in the rural supply chain tend to be more local manufacturers. Because I think they're more responsive. They understand the needs better, because this is not a market where you have a very sophisticated knowledge base of a product that I can compare on very high-end, very nuanced difference. It is purely about, does it do the basic functional stuff? And of course, it's a value-driven market. And it is changing rapidly because there are new people coming into the value stream. Their demands are changing. They're expecting different things. Technology is changing. Products from China, they're getting bombarded. The manufacturers are getting ideas about new products. People watch TV all the time. They're getting ideas about what they want to buy. Speed matters. And I think this is where these are not the best products quality-wise. They are pretty, I would say, shabby in that sense. They're still coming up. But mostly what I see, the dynamic, I think the supply side is mostly the local manufacturers. Even if it is technology, like I said, smartphone for $30. Solar panels, we talk about solar panels as if it's something out there that only big people do. Every house you will find, they will have access to this. There are these small shops in a village, they have stacks of solar cells. I couldn't believe it. Small, big, large, very, very large, and these are 25 years worth of life on a solar panel. Just imagine the second-hand market for solar panels is going to explode because new technology is coming in. They're more expensive. The richer people in the village will buy those. They'll put this back up. People are just way ahead. The movie industry, I mean, I can talk about it. It's just amazing, the dynamic aspect that you see changing like anything.
Thank you. Hugo?
One important question that you put, and as we say, we are very knowledge. We studied a lot, so we are also very arrogant. And when we say economic package, economic for whom? And normally it's for the industry side. It's not for the people, not for the consumer. So the response is yes, we need to reduce the package so the people can afford. But this is a sustainable issue as well, because you have more disposable. in terms of waste. So you need to work more for recycling. Brazil, for example, is the largest aluminum recycler of the world. And the reason is because recycling cans is not fashion, but makes money. And if this can increase wealth of population, is another way to bring, let's say, consciousness to this volume of new products. So if you work again in collaborative way, in a supply solution chain with everybody end to end, I think a lot of things could be changed.
Yeah, I want to add something to that too. We've done I'm happy to launch this paper here. We've done a study on what are the sort of expectations of society in terms of sustainable innovation and what it means for business now. And one of the things that we find in an ongoing, continual way, and the barriers for business to actually take up this challenge has been the concept that shareholder primacy was the one most important thing that they had to address. So if you couldn't demonstrate that it was going to be just good for bottom line profit right today, then there was a fear about doing it. But regulators, global chairmen of markets, companies who we engage with and others have been able to say, actually, the next horizon has been materiality. What are the things that really matter from a stakeholder and from a commercial perspective? And now this new horizon, as we're seeing as a result of things like the Sustainable Development Goals and targets and so many other forces for change like the internet and awareness of how the transformations can occur in these supply chains. Because of all of that, there is now that growing expectation which will see sustainable innovation become more and more of an expectation in our European developed countries and also increasingly in developing countries. So I think it's a consumer opportunity of the future and it's not really been realised yet. So anyway, I'd like to thank you all for paying attention to us and engaging with us, and thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
Very interesting stuff, and I'd like us all to thank the chairman, Catherine Tay-White. It's been a long morning. There's been lots of content. Lunch is ready outside now. Let's have a break.